I stood in the quiet of my Cape Cod home, the afternoon light slanting through the lace curtains, casting familiar patterns across the floorboards Daniel had polished so many years ago. The silence pressed against me, heavier than it had ever been, as though the house itself were grieving with me. My eyes lingered on the gallery of photographs that lined the walls of the living room, Clara's milestones captured in still frames, each one a reminder of how swiftly time had slipped through my fingers. There she was in her graduation gown, her smile radiant, the tassel swinging against her cheek as she held her diploma. Another showed her on her wedding day, the satin of her dress shimmering as she leaned into Andrew's embrace. And there, one of my favorites, Daniel in his professor's robes, looking dignified, proud, alive, before cancer took him from us far too soon. Each photograph whispered stories, but today they seemed to mock me. For what good were memories when my present was unraveling? My heart ached with the raw wound of yesterday's baby shower, the words Clara had spoken echoing in my head with merciless clarity. I had left the gathering quietly, my feet carrying me out while laughter and chatter filled the Hartwell's sprawling garden. My hand had clutched the baby blanket I'd spent months knitting, soft lavender yarn chosen carefully to soothe and comfort my grandchild. I never even had the chance to give it to her. My gift had felt small, almost foolish, in the presence of Victoria Hartwell's grandeur. And worse still, Clara had basked in her mother-in-law's praise, declaring with a glow I had once been the source of, that Victoria would be her child's true grandmother. The words had been a knife, and Victoria's smile, oh, I would never forget it. Triumphant, smug, a silent proclamation that she had won. 4 years, she had chipped away at me with backhanded compliments and little humiliations. Correcting the way I set a table at Clara's engagement dinner. Redecorating Clara and Andrew's first home, saying my taste was too traditional. Always offering helpful advice that somehow left me feeling small. I had stayed silent. I thought that was the dignified thing to do. I told myself Clara would see through the manipulations eventually, that my love would be enough. But as I walked away from that baby shower, I realized with terrible clarity that my silence had been my greatest mistake. Victoria's voice had become Clara's. I set the untouched blanket on my work table and felt my hands tremble, not from age but from the storm inside me. 4 years. I had told myself Daniel's warnings were exaggerated, that grief had made him suspicious of everyone. But I could still remember his voice, weak but determined, the night he handed me a sealed envelope. There are things Clara may need to know someday, he had said, his hand cold in mine. About the Hartwells. About Victoria. I've arranged everything with Charles. Promise me, Margaret, you'll use it if necessary. I had promised, though at the time I couldn't imagine breaking the illusion of peace. Clara had been happy with Andrew. Why stir up trouble? But yesterday had shown me the truth. Evelyn's spell had worked, and Clara was slipping away. I went to Daniel's antique roll-top desk, the one Victoria had once called charming in a vintage way, with that condescending curl of her lip. Sliding open a hidden compartment, I pulled out the envelope. My name was written across it in Daniel's familiar script, for Margaret, to open only when the package has been delivered to Clara. I traced the letters, tears threatening to fall. How had I been so naive? Daniel had seen it from the beginning, Victoria's calculating ways, her hunger for control. And I had dismissed it as grief-born paranoia. Now, standing in the wreckage of my relationship with Clara, I knew he had been right. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. My voice shook as I spoke. Charles, it's Margaret Lewis. I need you to send that package now. Yes, the one Daniel prepared. It's time. When I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. The decision was made. By noon tomorrow, Clara would have the truth in her hands. Whether she chose to believe it was beyond my control, but at least she would know, the brass knocker startled me an hour later. I opened the door to find Andrew standing there. His tall frame seemed smaller somehow, his shoulders slumped, his eyes rimmed red as if he hadn't slept. "Margaret," he said, his voice rough. "We need to talk about what happened yesterday." I let him in, noting the hesitation in his steps, the awkwardness with which he sat on the sofa where, years ago, he had asked for my blessing to marry Clara. "Clara doesn't know I'm here," he admitted, twisting his wedding band nervously. "But I needed to see you. What she said yesterday, that wasn't her." "Not really. Something's happening to her. Ever since we announced the pregnancy, it's like she's becoming someone else. Someone who sounds remarkably like your mother," I said gently. He flinched, and I knew I had struck the truth. I retrieved Daniel's letter and handed it to him, explaining about the package on its way. "Before you and Clara open it, I need you to tell me honestly, do you love my daughter for who she truly is? Not for the image your mother wants, but for Clara, stubborn, compassionate, sometimes insecure Clara." "Of course I do," he said, without hesitation. His sincerity softened me for a moment, but then his phone rang. He stepped outside to take the call, and through the window, I saw his expression shift from weary to shocked. When he returned, his face was pale. "My mother says you're planning to cause trouble," he said, his voice strained. "She claims Daniel fabricated evidence against our family to drive a wedge between Clara and me." I met his eyes. "And do you believe her?" He ran a hand through his hair, so like Daniel used to when faced with an impossible choice. "I don't know what to believe. Clara suddenly worships my mother after years of barely tolerating her. You're sending mysterious packages. My mother is hysterical. Just tell me, Margaret, what is going on?" Wordlessly, I pressed Daniel's letter into his hands. As he read, his expression shifted, from doubt, to dawning realization, to horror. "Is this true?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every word," I replied. "The package contains everything: financial records, investigator reports, photographs. Daniel documented it all. Ever since that first dinner when your mother told me Clara wasn't Hartwell material." Andrew's hand trembled as he set the letter down. "She told me a very different story, that she came to welcome you to the family, and you were cold, unwelcoming." A bitter laugh escaped me. "She told me to my face that Clara wasn't worthy of your name, and that I should encourage her to end your relationship. And you never told us. Clara had just lost her father. You made her happy. I thought love would be enough." The weight of those words settled heavily on my chest. His phone rang again, this time Clara. He answered quickly, forcing steadiness into his voice. "Hey, no, I just needed some air." "What package?" "Don't open it until I get there. Please, just wait." When he hung up, his face was grim. "It's been delivered. Clara says my mother is already there, insisting they burn it unopened." My heart lurched. "You need to go now, Andrew. Don't let her do it. Clara needs you more than ever." He hesitated at the door, his voice thick with regret. "Margaret, I'm so sorry. For not seeing sooner. For not stopping her." "It isn't your fault," I said softly. "Victoria has had decades to perfect her manipulations. Just go. Save my daughter." I stood at the window, watching as his car disappeared down the street. The silence of the house returned, but this time it felt different. Less suffocating, more purposeful. Daniel's letter rested on the table beside me, his handwriting steady, certain. He had always trusted that truth would prevail. For the first time, I dared to believe he might be right. I sank into his old armchair, the one that still carried his shape, and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, the reckoning would come, and this time, I would not be silent. The hours after Andrew's departure were some of the longest of my life. The house was still, but my thoughts roared like a storm at sea. I sat in Daniel's armchair, clutching the edges of his letter until my knuckles went white. Every tick of the clock on the mantel sounded like a warning. What if you're too late? What if Victoria convinces Clara to destroy the evidence? At last, as dusk settled over the neighborhood, my phone rang. The sound startled me so sharply that I nearly dropped the receiver. Clara's voice, trembling and tear-soaked, whispered through the line, "Mom, can you come over, please? I need you." I grabbed my coat, barely remembering to lock the door, and drove the familiar road to their colonial revival home. My hands shook on the steering wheel. By the time I pulled into their driveway, I spotted Victoria's silver Mercedes absent from its usual place. Relief coursed through me like a tide. Clara met me at the door, her face pale and blotchy from crying. Before I could say a word, she threw herself into my arms. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she sobbed. "I didn't know. I didn't see." Her body trembled against mine as I held her, stroking her hair like I had when she was a little girl who came home crying after a bad day at school. "It's all right, sweetheart," I murmured. "You see now. That's what matters." Inside, the living room bore the scars of confrontation. Papers littered the floor, a vase lay shattered on the rug, and dark stains of spilled water spread across the carpet. Andrew was there, kneeling to gather the documents, his expression somber but resolute. "She tried to burn them," he explained, handing me a folder filled with financial statements and photographs. When Clara insisted on opening the package, she lost control. She screamed, she threatened, and when that didn't work, she tried to destroy everything. I stopped her. Clara wiped her eyes, her voice thick with regret. "I believed her lies. I let her turn me against you, Mom. I said things I didn't mean, things that hurt you. I don't know how to fix it." I cupped her face, forcing her to look at me. "The truth fixes it, Clara. Love fixes it. That's all I ever wanted for you, to know who truly stands by you." Andrew picked up another folder, this one holding photographs from decades ago. "We found these too," he said quietly. The images showed a younger Daniel and me with William Hartwell, Andrew's father, and yes, even Victoria, smiling as though nothing had ever been wrong. Their arms linked, their expressions warm. They were friends, I explained softly, memories flooding back. William and Daniel were inseparable at Princeton. Victoria never approved of their friendship, and once she married William, she did everything she could to sever his ties with anyone she deemed beneath her. Andrew's jaw clenched. "She told me my father had no real friends, that people used him for his name. She rewrote everything." Clara looked at me, hurt shadowing her features. "Why didn't you tell me? About Dad's suspicions? About all of this?" I sighed, the weight of years pressing on my chest. "Because you had just lost Daniel when you met Andrew. You were happy, and I thought love would protect you from her. I thought silence was strength. I was wrong." Before I could say more, the doorbell rang. For a moment, I feared Victoria had returned to resume her assault. But when Andrew opened the door, a familiar figure stood there, Charles Newman, Daniel's old attorney. He held a sealed envelope in his hand. "This is for you," he said to Andrew, his tone heavy with significance. "It's from your father, William. He entrusted it to me years ago, alongside Daniel's package. He wanted it delivered only when the time was right." Andrew's hands shook as he broke the seal and read the letter inside. His eyes moved quickly over the page, and I watched his expression shift: shock, grief, anger, then something softer, almost relieved. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "My father knew," he whispered. "He knew what she was. He wrote that he was too weak to stand up to her, but Daniel gave him courage. Together, they made plans to protect me, to protect Clara, to protect our family from her control. He handed the letter to Clara, and she read aloud passages about a trust fund William had established in secret, a lakefront property in Vermont he had purchased as a refuge, and evidence he had gathered with Daniel to prove Victoria's financial crimes. Tears streamed down Andrew's face. He apologized for letting her dominate him. He said he wanted me to build the kind of life he never had the strength to claim. He and Daniel worked together, right up until the end, to make sure I wouldn't be trapped. The room was silent except for Clara's quiet sobs and the rustle of papers. For the first time, the power Victoria had held over us seemed to crack. The truth had finally stepped into the light. The following week, the Hartwell Foundation's annual gala loomed. Clara and Andrew were expected to attend, and Victoria was scheduled to preside over the event as always. But this time, things would be different. On the evening of the gala, I watched Clara prepare with a determination I hadn't seen in years. She wore a simple but elegant dress, her hand resting protectively on her growing belly. Andrew stood beside her, steady and supportive. They invited me to accompany them, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I belonged again. The ballroom was filled with Boston's elite, their laughter and champagne toasts echoing against marble walls. Victoria stood at the center, her smile as polished as ever. But when Clara and Andrew stepped onto the stage, silence fell. Clara's voice, though trembling at first, grew stronger with every word. At my baby shower, I said something I regret. I dismissed my mother, Margaret Lewis, and called another woman the true grandmother of my child. I said those words under influences I didn't understand at the time. But I do now. And I will not let lies define me anymore. All eyes turned toward Victoria, whose face froze in a mask of disbelief. Clara continued, her voice steady. The woman who raised me sacrificed her dreams so I could chase mine. She stood by me when I faltered. She gave me unconditional love, not control, not manipulation. She is my mother. She is the grandmother my child will know and cherish. Applause erupted, and I felt my throat tighten as tears welled in my eyes. Andrew took the microphone next, announcing reforms to the Hartwell Foundation, changes that would remove Victoria's control and redirect the organization's focus toward integrity and transparency. Victoria's composure shattered. She tried to speak, to regain her authority, but the audience was no longer hers. Her kingdom of influence crumbled in real time, and she knew it. She left the stage with trembling hands, her threats falling flat against the applause that followed. Clara and Andrew, later that night, back at their home, Clara sat with me in the quiet glow of the living room. She took my hand, her grip firm despite the tears in her eyes. I lost my way, Mom. I forgot who I was. I let her voice drown out yours. Can you ever forgive me? I smiled through my tears. There's nothing to forgive. Love doesn't vanish because of mistakes. It bends, it bruises, but it doesn't break. Andrew joined us, his voice solemn. Your husband and my father, they built a lifeline for us. We owe them everything. And we'll honor their sacrifice by living the life they wanted for us. That night, as I lay in their guest room, I whispered into the darkness, speaking to Daniel's memory. You were right. She needed the truth. And you gave me the strength to deliver it. For a moment, I swore I could hear his voice in return, soft but steady. Truth is the foundation of everything worthwhile, Margaret. I always trusted Clara would recognize it when she saw it.